Welcome to Bump Set Chat, the podcast where volleyball professionals come on and share their stories, experiences, and advice. Today, from Athletes Unlimited, I have Cassidy Lichtman. Welcome.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
So the way we start things off, we do a few random questions. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Coming home from playing pro over in Europe for the first time in a while, what meal are you looking forward to the most?
Probably Mexican food. I feel like that's kind of the more rare cuisine in Europe, and I'm from Southern California, so
Okay.
we do Mexican food well.
Perfect. All right. So you're invited to go play in a co-ed pickleball tournament. Which volleyball player are you picking as your partner?
Male or female?
It's a co-ed, so male.
Yeah, okay, male. Eric Shoji, easy.
It was funny. I was just chatting with him earlier, and he said you're a way better pickleball player than he is.
No way. There's no way. Eric was like a state champion in tennis.
I know, but that's what he said. And speaking of Eric, he said he had one question for you. He said, "Who's a bigger volleyball nerd?"
Me or him?
Yep, you or him.
I think it's him. He's on top of it. If he lived in the US the whole time, I think he would be all over the college scene, but even when he's overseas, he knows what's going on.
All right, there we go. All right, so next question is, what's one TV show or movie you've watched way too many times?
Oh, probably The Italian Job, like
The
the Mark
original
Wahlberg,
or the newer one?
the newer one, the Mark Wahlberg
Yeah.
one. That or Friends, the TV
Okay.
show.
When did volleyball start for you?
Pretty much before I was born. My mom is a volleyball coach, so she was coaching at the time.
Yeah.
My parents actually met in a volleyball gym.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
so yeah, I'm the child of volleyball. So when I was little, she would bring my brother and me to the gym and give us a ball and tell us to entertain ourselves for a couple hours while she coached practice. And then I started playing club when I was 10 years old at San Diego Volleyball Club. And then, obviously played up through high school and the rest.
And now, what is it about volleyball? What is the hook it has on you that it's led you to this wonderful career you have? Played pro, played for Team USA, played at Stanford.
Yeah, I always loved it. I mean, I think for so many different reasons, I think it's one of the best team sports. I love the flow of it. The fact that, my coach at Stanford, John Denning, used to say that we think it's the most people in the smallest area of any sport. And so that really requires you to kind of move around each other in a really cohesive way. And when that doesn't work, things don't go well in the game. So I think being within that flow and working with my teammates in that way is a really cool kind of feeling to be a part of. And then there's so much, thought and strategy and reading of the game that goes into it. And so many different kind of variables that it never really gets boring. And you can practice a lot of different skills. It's not, rowing or something where you go in and you get to do one thing.
Right.
So I think it, keeps you engaged and keeps your attention. You can do a lot of different things in practice. So, and then obviously my teammates and coaches and the people involved, I think volleyball is a great community. So growing up in that space with my mom and her friends and learning from them and becoming a part of that family at a really early age, I think, I just loved it from the beginning.
Yeah. And it's one of those sports where you're always picking up stuff, no matter how early or late you start playing the game. Wherever you go, whether it's a different, gym or a different country, somebody has some trick that, I'm going to put that in my toolbox.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I loved, growing up, being around and watching older players. I mean, even my mom and her friends, she was still playing, USA Open nationals at the time. So they would come in and play against our teams and, learning from those women, from my older brother and his teams, going and watching better players or even better getting a chance to play with them. I think you take so much away. And then, yeah, seeing the international game is like, it opens up kind of a whole new window into how volleyball can be played differently than we do in the US.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, before we even start talking further about your volleyball career, there was a time where you weren't even sure if volleyball was going to be in your future. When you were 9, you had you could barely walk.
Yeah, I kind of woke up one morning at 9 years old and there was a shooting pain in one of my legs, in kind of my left shin area, and I couldn't walk, and because that hurt a lot more, and so it ended up being sort of months and months of going to the doctor, and um, the whole thing is a longer story, but essentially they couldn't figure out how to help. And so 6 months in or so, they were at the point where it looked like I might just not be able to walk again. And I, in my infinite wisdom, as like a then 10-year-old, decided that they were wrong, and I was going to walk on the last day of school, and so didn't bring my crutches, and that was the entire plan. Um, but put my foot on the ground for the first time in 6 months, and eventually, in physical therapy, relearned how to walk, and as soon as I could walk, I wanted to play volleyball. But yeah, I mean, the problem was I didn't actually get better, and so that ended up being sort of a one of the obstacles I had to struggle with in my career, all the way throughout, and sort of never ended up getting a full answer from the medical side. But yeah, at that point, it was unclear if I wanted to play volleyball. But like I said, as soon as I could walk, I wanted to go out and play.
Yeah. And so you've dealt with the pain all through your career and just figure out a way to compartmentalize it or just, play through it?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I think obviously it's made it harder in a lot of ways, and
Yeah.
volleyball has made the pain worse in a lot of ways. I think, on the other hand, having something like that to focus on um, and try to kind of have within my control was probably helpful from like an emotional and mental side of it. But yeah, it just took a lot of focus and um, pain tolerance
Yeah.
and a willingness to do it. But I really loved playing, and I really wanted to see how good I could be. And so at different points in my career, it was a question of like, do I keep pushing it? And I could back off a little bit, and I won't be as good a volleyball player as I could have been, but it'll hurt a little bit less.
Yeah.
And I pretty much always made the decision like I really want to see how good I can be, and if I get to a point where I really can't take it, we'll deal with it.
Yeah.
But uh, was lucky in that regard that I came pretty close in some moments. Um, but was able to kind of handle it, and particularly in college and the national team were
Yeah.
the harder times.
Absolutely. And now, speaking of college, you ended up picking Stanford. What was that process like? What was the final thing that said, yeah, this is where I want to be?
Yeah, at the time I thought it was a really hard decision. It had basically been narrowed down to Washington, Minnesota, and Stanford. And it was, Washington had just been in the Final Four. Minnesota, I think, had been in the Final Four recently, and it was Mike Hebert, who was, legendary coach, and then Stanford that was perennially great. And I loved all of them for different reasons. They were all recruiting me in different kind of positions. Stanford was basically like, we don't know what you're going to do, but you can come and we'll give you a scholarship and we'll see. Uh, I was getting recruited as a 5-1 setter at Washington and a 6-2 setter hitter at Minnesota. Um, and I think, it was really, visiting and then going to camp. I went to, summer camp, and John Dunning led it. And I really liked kind of how he communicated and coached. And, he sat down with me and talked to me about the player he thought I was. And so I think that plus meeting the team and just understanding kind of the energy of the program and the culture, uh, it felt like the place that I wanted to be. And it's hard to turn down Stanford. So
Absolutely.
I cared about the school side of it too. And the other two are great schools as well, but obviously Stanford's Stanford. So
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, looking back on the guests of the night, I think I've had 5 or 6 Stanford alums. I've had Eric and Kavika,
nice.
Morgan Hintz, Justin Louis, Maddie Bug, and just recently, Sammy Francis.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's fun. Yeah. Yeah. So Kavika was 1 year ahead of me and Eric was 1 year behind
Oh,
me. So
nice.
we got to hang out a lot at Stanford. The Hawaii boys were some of my, best friends there. And then I got to coach Morgan, her freshman year. So that was super fun too.
Nice. And I always forget to ask this from my guests. What did you take at Stanford?
Like, what did I major in?
Yeah.
Yeah, I majored in political science and I got a master's in history.
Oh, wow. And what is your favorite era of history? Or do you have
Ooh.
one?
Um, I mean, I think probably like World War II era, but then I focused on the Middle East,
Okay.
because it felt like it was not going to get less relevant
Yep.
um, to the current day. So it seemed like it was a good thing to learn about.
Very cool. And then, at Stanford, what were some of the more challenging things you had to sort of, deal with, especially that first year? Because as a student athlete, especially playing college volleyball, you're thrown right into the thick of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that's helpful is that, when you come in as a volleyball player, you're there in preseason with your teammates. And so you get a little bit of a chance to kind of get acclimated to campus and everything before you actually start school. And it's a quarter school, so you don't start until September and you're there in
Nice.
beginning of August. So I think that helped me. One of my teammates, Cynthia Barbosa, just handed me, the sort of the course catalog and was like, "Look at this, mark the classes you like." Um, so it's nice to have, people like her and Fuluka Conradwo and people I could talk to about what it was. But yeah, I mean, it's different than high school. You're going in and you don't have your sort of planned out routine every day of like
Right.
class 8 to 2 and then practice. And so the biggest thing was just figuring out how to use the sort of awkward time windows during the day that you do have. The 45 minutes between a class and when you have to get started for practice. Um, so I think that's probably the biggest challenge. And then the end of the quarter, especially in that fall when you're in season, we basically have finals during the Final Four. So my first ever final I took in a hotel room in Sacramento between serve and pass in the semifinal.
Wow.
So that's a little bit of a lot because the professors are maybe not as flexible as
Mm-hmm.
some other schools, and so it's like you have to take it on the day of the exam. And um so yeah, I mean, I think at Stanford in particular, like understanding that campus really does put academics first,
Mm-hmm.
um and yet you have to balance that with a really strong priority of playing your sport.
Yeah, absolutely. And I understand you even had your own Stanford golf cart.
I had a golf cart for my junior year, so they give those to generally they give them to injured athletes. So people who've had surgeries, but I was really struggling at that point with this pain issue, and finally went to our team doctor and was like, I don't know what you can do, but can we do anything? And I had been going to the Stanford hospital, but they couldn't really find any medications that would work.
Yeah.
And so my struggle at that point was just like getting through it. Like, do I walk to class? Do I bike to class? Like both are really hard.
Yeah.
Just felt really overwhelming. And so she got me a golf cart. Um, and it really lightened the burden. Like it helped a
I
lot.
bet.
Yeah, so that was, I think, junior or senior year. And I got to drive around in that, which is, we piled probably too many of my teammates onto the golf cart. But the Stanford, campus police were nice about it.
Nice. And looking back at your time at Stanford, are there any particular moments or just, highlights that stick out for you? The people, certain games, or anything like that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my favorite match probably ever at Stanford was the semifinals my sophomore year in 2008. It was us versus Texas, and so it was on our side. It was Cynthia Barbosa and Fluke Akaradwo and Alex Kleinman, and on their side it was Destiny Hooker and Julianne Fawcett and Ashley Engel, and so they were a really strong team, and they beat us in the first two sets. And we came back and won in five. And it was the first time in the history of the Final Four that had happened.
Wow.
And so, we watched the broadcast afterwards, and the announcers keep saying, like, this has never happened. Like, it's never gonna end. And, so that was probably my favorite. And then yeah, I mean, there are other matches too, but just the times with the team and being silly in the locker rooms and
Yeah.
bus rides and whatnot.
Nice. And then, after college, was pro a no-brainer? That was something that was in the books for you?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know that until, probably I got to Stanford and I didn't know professional volleyball existed really. Like I knew the national team was a thing. And then probably a couple years in as my teammates started to go to graduate and go play professionally, that's when I really started thinking more about it. And so yeah, I think by the time I was in my junior and senior year, it felt like that's something that I really wanted to do.
Yeah. And as something, talking to a lot of the athletes that have, gone over and play pro, it's not all rainbows and unicorns when you think of that professional lifestyle. You're in a different country, different language, maybe the only American, English speaking and you're alone.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes people think about it like they're European vacations,
Yeah.
and it is not that at all. It's more like you're moving to a new city for your job and you don't know anybody, and also you can't talk to any of them.
Right.
So it can be a really isolating experience, and you're so far from your family and friends. Um, And I think it's just a little bit different when you go from, the college or even the national team environment where you have so much kind of support and it really feels like sort of your family. And then in a lot of places overseas, it's a job and you're
Yeah.
treated, like an employee and or like sort of a tool in the machine.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely a different type of environment. I think some people go over there and love it, and it depends on what team you're on and what the ownership is like and all of that. And there are some places I enjoyed more than others, but yeah, I mean, to me, I think it was definitely my priority was the national team um, and getting better and mostly for that purpose. Uh, and I think it's a great experience in terms of learning about the world.
Hmm.
Um, and so I appreciated it in that sense, but definitely it takes a little bit of a toll to, move countries every 6 months or so.
Yeah, and another aspect onto that, you're in a different country where the cultures are totally different. Like I was talking to Cole Hogland, who went to Hawaii, but he's played in Japan, and he's the only English guy on the team, the translator. But when you're on the court, you're trying to
Yeah.
figure stuff out. But again, you also have all the different cultures, that how they act and whatnot. It's a big adjustment.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the language and the culture piece and the food piece
Yeah.
uh are all a little bit of an adjustment. And I mean the one good thing is sort of volleyball is the kind of universal language. Like they might play it a little bit differently, but for the most part, you go out there and if you don't know what's going on, like the ball comes to you and you play it.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I played in China and we had one Australian on the team, so there were two of us who were foreigners and a translator. But even the translator, it's like she's not. You don't go to school and learn volleyball language.
Right. Yeah.
So, we'll be in a full timeout and the coach is talking for 30 seconds and she turns to us and she's like, defense. And we're like, what about the defense? And she listens to me, she go, back row defense. And we're like, okay, just
Oh.
like we had one or two teammates who spoke some English and we're like, let us know if we really need to know something. Otherwise, we're just going to go play. And but yeah, so I appreciated, I had a couple teammates on each team that, really like wanted to talk and so I could learn from them about, other cultures and they had questions about the US. And so those are my favorite
Yeah.
probably things about overseas when you really got to learn about kind of how they live.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a trippy kind of thing to be a part of.
Yeah. And now, were you a hitter or setter when you were playing overseas?
Yeah, good question. My first season in Poland, I was a setter, and then when Kars took over as head coach of the national team, he was going to put me on the outside, so I hit for the last 4 years overseas.
And now, did you have a preference? Like I had Micah on, and he talked about that he loved being a hitter because nobody, you don't snap heads when you're a setter. You hit the ball, heads turn. He's like, as a setter, no, it doesn't happen.
Yeah, I didn't have a strong preference. I always felt like, people ask me that my whole career, like, what do you want to do? And I was always like, I want to win and I want to play. So the only time I wasn't, you know, content with it was if I was doing, if I was setting and we couldn't pass
Hmm.
or put a ball away, then I was like, I'm in the wrong spot. Like move me somewhere else. Um, so that was the only time where I felt like I wanted to do something else. But other than that, I mean, it was fun at Stanford to be able to hit and set. Um, but yeah, I was just out there. I wanted to play. I wanted to win.
Nice. And then you're speaking overseas. What were the countries you played in?
Yeah, I started in Poland and I was in Switzerland, Azerbaijan, France, and China.
Azerbaijan has a pro team or pro league.
Yeah, it was a big, like probably, there was a window of probably 5 or 6 years where that was the place to
Oh
go. Like
wow.
I assume what happened is somebody in the government said that they wanted a professional volleyball, and so they had 6 teams in the capital in Baku, and a bunch of the top Americans were going there and foreigners from everywhere. So normally there's a foreigner rule, and you have a few foreigners per team. I don't think they had any foreigner rule, so everybody was foreign essentially. So
Yeah.
my team there was, you know, a Russian and a Belarusian and a Croatian and a Dominican and a Korean and
Oh
an
wow.
Italian and a couple Americans. And so yeah, it was definitely a very different kind of place to play.
Yeah. And now looking back, are there any countries you wish you would have played in?
I think Italy for sure. That's sort of the top place people want to go to. I think that would have been cool. I mean, I love Japan. I'm too much like a Japanese player, so I never would have gotten a contract there. But And Brazil would have been cool too.
Yeah. And now, speaking of like, you're too much of a Japanese style. That's
Hmm.
one thing that, I've, since starting this podcast is, countries all have different styles of play, whether it's the ground and pound of, the American game or the technical aspect from Japanese. How big of an adjustment was that for you when you started playing against other countries?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely an adjustment in kind of your mindset as you go into play. I thought it was such a cool thing because it really feels like the style of ball that they play is, related to their culture. Like the Japanese are so disciplined,
Hmm.
they're just going to outwork you. And so you have to go into that game like knowing that you're going to have long rallies, not getting frustrated when you have to take 10 swings to put the ball away. Um, and as opposed to like the Russians who they're playing, out of system high ball volleyball, and they're just hitting as hard as they can. Just have some like huge players, but they'll get frustrated easily if
Yeah.
things don't like their power before everything else. But if things don't go well, they can crumble a little bit. And so, learning in like the Latin countries that are a little bit more emotional, and you're like, how do we get them kind of angry? And
Hmm.
so it was cool to kind of see those different influences. And as you learn going from, first tournament on the national team where you're listening like the vets talk about, what this team is like and who these great players are. And then to a couple years in where you're like, oh yeah, she does this and this team is like that. And especially when you're going overseas and you're playing with and against all of these players in your club season too, and you get to learn about kind of what they're like and what they like to do.
Yeah. Yeah. It was funny. You mentioned the Latin area. They were very intense. I had Dustin Watton on, and he said when he played in Brazil, it was like they were so angry, but they're not angry. They're just, that's just their style and that's their
Yeah,
culture.
just
Yeah.
high emotion and it's a fun kind of way to play. Like they have a lot of passion in it and also understand the game so well. Brazil is one of the hardest because they're so good, but also like they're probably most similar to us with sort of a heightened level of kind of emotion.
Yeah. And now, looking back on it, if any players coming to you saying, "Hey, Cass, I'm looking to go pro," what kind of advice do you have for them? And let's say go pro overseas first before we talk about
Yeah.
now you guys can play here at home.
Yeah, it's evolved a little bit, but yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is, getting an agent. People ask me a lot, like, how do you get contracts overseas? And most people have agents who kind of have contacts in the different leagues. It's an overwhelming thing as just a player to think about how I even get over there. So, I had an agent that I trusted a lot, who kind of brought offers my way. And then it's figuring out kind of what your priorities are. Some people they just want to be in the best possible country. Some people want the most money. Some people want to be on the national team. And, there were times when like I had to weigh those things and go, okay, this contract is more money, but I think this league is going to be better for me, or I'm going to be better on, in a more position to play more. And if my priority is the national team, then I want to do that. So I think figuring out kind of what you really want out of it. And maybe it's just like I want to go hang out in this country
Yeah,
for
right.
6 months, and that's fine.
Yeah. Or this team will pay you. That team, maybe not.
Exactly. Like having an agent that knows kind of, who's a little sketchy is super important.
Yeah. And now, speaking of the national team, what was your path? When did that show up on the radar for you?
Yeah, I had I think, unconventional path to the national team. So I was, let's see, I was in my first kind of go around with them was in 2011. So I had just graduated, went to play in Poland, and they were putting together kind of a young team to go to the Pan American Games. And Andy Banikowski was coaching it. And so, Andy obviously knew me well from coaching at UCLA against us at Stanford, and they were looking for players, and so they asked me to come, and I was a passing opposite on that team. We had Angie Pressey and Cynthia Barbosa on the outside, and so I passed and hit on the right. Was setting in Poland, so we had not passed or hit in six
Oh,
months,
wow.
but it was fine. So we sent this team to the Pan Am Games, and we were expected to like not even make it out of pool play because there were other teams that had their full rosters there,
Yeah.
and then we make it out of pool play, and we ended up getting the bronze medal in this match against Dominican Republic. That was like a dog fight. So that was my first experience, but I wasn't really on the team yet. I just kind of made that roster, and then
Yeah.
2012 comes, and nobody really joins the gym in an Olympic year. Like that's not a thing. So I had emailed Hugh McCutcheon and said, I would love to come in if there's any opportunity. And, everybody gets back at different points from
Yeah.
overseas. And the Polish season was ending earlier than a lot. So he said, yeah, you can come in the beginning and then you'll probably leave as soon as people get here. And so I went in and I sat for a couple weeks or, a week or so. And then the setters got back, but the right sides weren't. And he said, can you play opposite for a minute? And I was like, yep. And then I did that. And the opposites came back. And I think I left for like a week or so. And then an outside got hurt. And he called me back up and he said, Cass, can you come back? And so I came back and played outside. And they sent, half the team over to Grand Prix, one of the big tournaments. And I played a little bit of libero. And so I ended up just kind of staying through the whole summer. And then they chose the Olympic team and they sent um, the kind of the rest to Pan American Cup. So suddenly I'm like starting on the outside at Pan Am Cup. Um, and then the next summer in 2013, when Karts took over, there were all the new players were, Kim Hill and kind of that era were coming into the gym in sort of like a tryout period. They had, either 2 weeks or kind of a month to sort of try out to the team. And somehow I just skipped that and was just on the team and was considered like a veteran because I had been there the whole summer before. And so I always say I kind of snuck into the national team gym and then ended up staying for 5 years.
Nice. And do you remember that first time you got the jersey with your name on it?
Yeah, I think the first time actually was I was still in college, it was my senior year, and they had a winter training block for a bunch of the seniors, and I didn't come down for all of it because I was trying to graduate. So I would come down kind of at the end of each week and practice for a few days. And we had a couple kind of exhibition matches or scrimmages or whatever, and they gave us some jerseys. And it's a pretty cool moment to be
Yeah.
like, here's the USA jersey. And I still have a bunch of them at home. And there's just, I mean, even at Stanford too, looking looking at that and being like, I actually made it here is a pretty crazy thing.
And every year after everybody's done their pro season coming back, how much fun is that first practice where everybody gets to see each other and hang out?
It's so great. It's like the first day of school and especially since those pro seasons can be, they can be really grueling and you're half the time you have coaches you don't love and so you're just kind of grinding through practice and so coming back into an environment that you really enjoy and getting to see all your friends and then like go through a practice that makes sense and play good volleyball and all of that. It's super fun. And I think at that time especially the gym was a really kind of happy place. Like we had a really good culture and I think even as warm-ups like you're throwing music on and Courtney Thompson's cracking jokes, and it's just a good vibe.
Yeah. Yeah, I had Shannon Windsor on, who's coach of Team Canada there, and she
Hmm.
said they know that first practice, we're not getting anything done. It's just,
Yeah,
hugs, laughing and crying. It's a good warm up.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And now, before we talk about Athletes Unlimited, you briefly touched on you were coaching at Stanford. How was that experience?
Yeah, it was good. So I was retiring from the national team in 2016, and I John Dunning called me, and his assistant coach was leaving. He said, "Do you want to come coach?" And I was like, "I don't think so. I don't think I want to coach college, and I don't want to come for a year and then leave." And he said, it's okay. Like we'll take you for as long as you want to be here. And so I thought about it and I called him back and said, okay, I'll do it. And it ended up being really a great kind of off ramp from playing at the time because you're still in the gym and still around it. But I also figured, Stanford was where kind of my network and connections were, so it'd be a good place to figure out what was next. And it ended up, being a really cool season. I think what people forget about that year, this was, Morgan Hens and Catherine Plummer and Jenna Gray and Adriana Fitzmaurice, they were all freshmen, and Inky Ajanica was a fifth year senior. And, we ended up winning a national championship. But what people forget is we were not good at the beginning of the season.
Wow.
Like, we lost to some teams that I never lost to in my career and never thought twice about. And um, we were super young. We had some injuries. We switched our lineup multiple times before we found the lineup that we ended in. And so we had a ton of talent, but they were so inconsistent. And like, I think a few weeks in, John was like, well, like, what do you think? How do you like coaching? And I was like, honestly, most times during matches, I'm just annoyed because like at any given time, there's a couple of people playing well and a couple of people who are absolute train wrecks.
Mm-hmm.
So they were a really fun team to coach though, like a lot of personality and a lot of, we had, I think 12 out of 14 of them were freshmen and sophomores. So like a lot of willingness to learn, a lot of fun in the gym. The B side was really incredible. We called them the machine team, and they were like a huge part of us winning because they really brought it every day in practice. And so it was a really fun kind of group to coach. And then obviously, going and winning a national championship
Right.
is not bad.
Now, what's harder, being on the court or guiding the team from the bench?
Being on the court's harder. I think being off of the court is hard in the sense that I'm like, I don't really control this. At the end of the day, like they're gonna do it or they aren't. Um, but yeah, and if you're on the court, like you're the one who's got to make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So my daughter started playing volleyball a couple of years ago, and I played way back in the day in college and whatnot. It's so hard watching her. It's harder watching her than actually playing. It's like, oh man,
Yeah.
you want to send thoughts to them, but yeah, it's a different perspective.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think I get more nervous watching, less so coaching a little bit, but like if I'm watching my friends play, I'll get more nervous than if
Yeah.
I'm playing.
Yeah. And now you said you retired from the Nationals. Did you also, was that retirement from being pro as well? Back in
Yeah, so I
2016?
had, I had completely I had stopped playing in 2016, up until AU started. So I thought I was done playing professionally.
Yeah. And then what was your path after? What was your sort of game plan before Athletes Unlimited brought you back into volleyball?
Yeah, I had gone completely outside of sports. So um, I took a job in DC working for this woman named Megan Smith, who had been the chief technology officer of the United States under President Obama. And she had just left the White House when the administration ended and started her own company that did a lot of things, but was kind of focused on projects around like equity and economic empowerment that were often kind of tech adjacent. But it was kind of perfect for me coming out of volleyball because we had all types of projects with all different types of
Yeah.
organizations. Like we worked with the United Nations and Hollywood and Native America and MIT and just, all kinds of different things. So I got to learn a lot of new stuff and meet different types of people. So I did that for a couple of years and learned a lot. And then came back to California and I started my own nonprofit called Path. And
Mm-hmm.
that was really focused on kind of creating content with elite athletes and coaches, helping teach kind of human and life skills to younger athletes. And that's, kind of primarily what I was doing in the middle of COVID, when AU was starting up. And then Jordan Larson called me and said, "Hey, there's this new volleyball league starting." And I was like, "Sure, there is." There's
Yeah.
always there was always like a new volleyball league starting, and it was, I think professional would it's not how I would describe some of the
Yeah.
start, like you're getting paid $20 to show up at a tournament.
Right.
Um, but it was, Jordan was involved at the time, there were a few national team players, and so I was like, I'll get on the presentation with our CEO, John Patricoff, and he explained kind of the approach and the business model, and I felt like it seemed different enough from previous attempts that it might work. I think it's people look back now and it seems a little bit like pro volleyball was inevitable, but at the time it was really still a big question mark of is anybody going to watch this?
Right.
Can we do it? And but listening to him, it felt like they had a really interesting approach to it, and it was only 6 or 7 weeks, and so I could kind of keep doing what I was doing and get back and play. So I started training again and came back for the first couple of seasons.
And now, for those that don't know, what is AU? What is that format they have? Because it's definitely
Yeah, so
unique.
yeah, it's super unique. So essentially, we take 44 athletes and bring them to one city. So we have kind of that's our full roster. And we have 5 weeks of competition. And each week we redraft the teams. So as opposed to, a traditional league that has teams in different cities and whatnot, this is sort of like if people watch the NBA or WNBA All-Star game, it's like that, except for that there are actual stakes, so people are trying.
Yes.
And it's a whole series of it. So you get to watch players in different combinations, kind of play off for who's the best player. And then the way that we kind of score is we're playing normal volleyball throughout. So each week there's 4 teams. They play a round robin. You have wins and losses. but each player on those teams is getting individual points based on whether their team wins or loses, their own kind of personal performance. So if I get a kill, I get points. If I make an error, minus points, and then MVP votes. And so we keep a running leaderboard that changes every point of every game.
Right.
And then the top four on the leaderboard each week are the captains, and they actually get to draft their teams for the next week. So at the end, we crown, one champion and give out, four medals for the top performers. So it's a super competitive model. It's obviously unlike anything that we've seen really before
Hmm.
in the sport, and I had no idea going into it if that was going to be fun or chaotic or if it was going to work.
Right.
Um, and it turns out it works really well. Like it's a really fun, I mean, I think for the athletes, it's a new type of challenge that you usually get to this point in your career and you've done the same thing. And it's not to like replace the traditional league
Hmm.
model, but it's a great complement to it, and that you get to watch, the top players kind of come together and play off for and settle kind of the age-old sports debate, like who's really the best of the best.
You're right.
Um, so yeah, so it's been really fun. The scoring system I think works really well, and um, was created with a bunch of data from international volleyball on, you know, the all of the stats. So it's equalized as much as possible across positions so everybody can kind of compete.
And now, and the other nice thing about it, it fits in a small window where it doesn't impact the national, the college, the national or pro really.
Yeah, so it's worked out really well, as the pro landscape has kind of developed around us. Like when we started our first season, it was still kind of mid-COVID times. So we were it really. Even the national team I think wasn't training at that time. So we came together, and then, as Love and PVF have developed in the last couple of years, it's worked out really well that we have our little window in the fall. And we're kind of intentionally designed as this quick season. It's essentially like playoffs. Like we
Yeah.
instead of playing an entire regular season, it's like we play playoffs only,
Right.
uh, in this kind of tournament style. And then our players can go and play, they play with the national team before us, and then after us, they can play with PBF or Love, or they can go internationally, and play in some other leagues. So I think it's worked out really well in that sense.
And now that first year, how was, what was that first practice like? You had all these players coming home and it's like, is this really happening? We're playing here?
Yeah, I think the whole first season was kind of a dream. Like to be able to be in the US and play for the first time. And not only that, but AU has such an incredibly high standard for how we treat the athletes, that it wasn't just like you get to play here. It's like you get to play and get treated really well. And you hear from our athletes a lot that it's the first time they felt like a true professional, in terms of that kind of standard of operations. And I think we've been able to maintain that culture and gratitude a lot, like because the athletes are so happy to be there and have that experience. Um, and it's just a different type of environment. Like I think sometimes people assume that it would become this kind of catty, like individualized
Right.
culture because you're really competing against all 43 other athletes. And what we've seen is it's actually the opposite. Like it feels like you have 43 other teammates. Um, and so it's really this kind of like super joyful, kind of loving environment that's also incredibly competitive.
Yeah.
Like more, I want to say most similar to kind of like if you go to like an Olympics opening or closing ceremony, like that's what it feels like. And so we've been able to kind of maintain that in that first season also, and to have Jordan Larson there, to have Shayla Castro come from Brazil and Betty De La Cruz from Dominican, like really top players, come and then love it and come back.
Yeah.
I think it's been one of the coolest things to see.
Yeah. And I would imagine the locker room probably feels more like of the college locker room or the national team locker room. It's just sort of it's not a job as opposed to, in the pros.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's, again, like you'll play against somebody, and then you'll go back to the same locker room and hang out, or play with their dog or their kids. And so it really does feel like this kind of family environment. And again, like cutthroat on the court, like they're all, because they're competing every single point for these leaderboard points, and set wins and match wins really matter. So they're dialed in when on the court. But like last season, we had to have like a 5 minute like passing period during serve and pass because they just want to like hug each other. And I'm like, you've been together for 6 weeks. But it's really, and now it's cool. Now it's cool too to see them go out into their pro teams and play against each other and like be so excited to see each other
Right.
the rest of the year that you create this little community that has been a part of this that I think thinks it's really special.
Yeah. And then, after you were done playing, what inspired you to move into the leadership role off the court, and how was that transition challenged or fulfilled you?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the cool things about AU is the players are really involved in decision-making processes. And so I was part in the first couple of seasons of what we call our player executive committee, which is a group of 5 athletes from the league that are really involved in all the decision making. And so they meet with the leadership of the organization every week, pretty much throughout the year, and are consultant on everything, on what our jerseys look like and where we play and what kind of court we play on, what the rules are, who the athletes are that are there. Um, so, being a part of that and seeing how the business worked was, really eye-opening as a player, especially when you get to be a part of building it from kind of the ground up. So switching over to the staff side was kind of seamless. I wasn't sure about it at first. I wasn't sure I wanted to work in volleyball necessarily. Um, and the organization is just like so thoughtful and great, kind of from the leadership down, that it was like, how do you not kind of join up with this? And so it really was sort of our CEO John Patricoff and his co-founder Jonathan Soros and our COO Anna Drucker, like that leadership team, the idea of working under them was one of the main things that convinced me. And then the other thing was just like seeing where volleyball was at in that moment, 2.5, 3 years ago, and realizing that this was going to be kind of a pivotal moment for the sport. And if that was the case, I really wanted to be a part of kind of helping shape that. But yeah, so then they were kind of opening this up as a full-time job and as the director of sport. And so I took that uh, on the staff side. And really it was just kind of a switch from, a seat around the table to a different one, from being on the player executive committee, our PEC. And so now I meet with them, every week and they help shape the decisions.
That's good. And it's got to be rewarding knowing that, and good for them to have somebody who was a player involved on these decisions, because, you get respect, you have respect, and people believe that this is a valid thing. This is, this isn't its, but you're looking out for their best interest.
Yeah, I think from the start, it's one of the smart, and they'll tell you the same. It's one of the smartest decisions they made, like from the very beginning, to partner with the athletes, because I think it's such a incredible thing to set aside your ego and to say, I don't know everything, especially for people with that kind of status and
Yeah.
experience in the world. I mean, John Patrick came from running the MLS team in New York. Like, it's not like he was new to sports. But they really came in and were like, we're not experts in volleyball, or we run softball in other leagues. So we're going to bring in the athletes who are experts in this and their experience and just ask them like how they would do it. And I think it's been one of the reasons that it's run so smoothly and that our athletes love it, is because we're genuinely involved in it.
Right.
And then I think, me being able to come over to the staff side has just helped kind of keep that process smooth, because I do have a relationship with the athletes and understand them, and it really hasn't changed like my approach at all. Like, I think it's something that's really unique about the organization is that in so many times leagues and athletes are just kind of by nature of how it's set up, kind of pitted against each other. The WNBA is in negotiations right now, right, on their CBA, and
Yeah.
because there's just different interests on the ownership side. And so we're set up so differently that it really felt like when I went from athlete to staff member that I really haven't changed anything about my approach.
Yeah.
It's just kind of coming at it from the other perspective.
Nice. And now, to this point, what are some of the biggest challenges AU faces in terms of expanding or reaching new audiences?
I think the biggest challenge is just the challenge for volleyball overall, which is it's such a massive sport. And the numbers are so undeniable in so many ways. But we have trouble breaking out into kind of mainstream culture
Right.
and media. So I think for any part of whether it's college, whether it's any of the pro leagues, that's the biggest thing is how do we become part of the conversation in a bigger way? And so that's, part of that is, on in my side, like growing AU, and part of it is just how do we push the sport forward overall?
Yep. And now with season 5 coming up in a few, I guess in a few months, where will it be happening and where can people watch it?
Yeah, we're super excited about it. So we have two new markets that we're going to. This is the first time we're going to split our season between two markets. So we'll be in Omaha for the first half and then Madison for the second. So anybody who wants to come, there's season ticket deposits, or I think ticket deposits in general are available now. We don't have our exact game days yet, but we try to play around weekends. We're also going to try to avoid home games for Nebraska and Wisconsin, obviously. Um, but super excited to go there. And then we've had a deal with ESPN the last couple of years. We'll announce broadcast partners probably in the next couple of months as we figure out the game days and the other partners. But generally we're available to watch kind of in the US and worldwide.
Nice. And now, let's go back to your playing days. When you were playing, did you have any particular pregame rituals or, did you have to have a nap or certain meal playlist?
Yeah, I usually took a nap. I'm actually a really bad napper. I'm like terrible at falling asleep. So I would take like a fake nap, like just lie there and pretend like you're sleeping for a while, which is restful. And then usually a shower and then kind of be ready for the game. Um, go over the scouting report, that kind of thing.
All right. And now, were you a sneakerhead? Did you have a certain pair of shoes you like to play in or whatever worked?
I wasn't, I'm actually, I feel like more of a sneakerhead now than I was then. My favorite pair were probably when I was in the national team, Mizuno made these like, I call them like the Spider-Man shoes. They made like this red and blue shoe that was the closest thing we had had to kind of a running shoe, volleyball shoe hybrid, which I really liked. But now that I'm retired but working in the sports world, the cool thing about working in the sports world is you can kind of dress like even when you like dress up events at conferences, you can also go with like Nikes or something. So now I have more like Nikes and Converse.
All right. And now, here's a controversial question. Who has a better shoe game, you or Jordan Larson? And let me preface that with when, Kelly Hunter was on, Kelly said Jordan definitely had a better shoe game than her or John Cook. So, who has a
Yeah.
stronger game, you or Jordan?
I imagine it's Jordan because she's been sponsored um, for longer. She's probably better than the Nikes, and I probably roll the Converse.
Yeah. Favorite color in Converse, or it depends on what you're wearing with them?
It depends on what I'm wearing with them for sure, but I like the kind of hybrid color pairs. Like I have some that are like black on one side and like electric blue on the
Oh,
other,
nice.
or have like a fade in them. Those are cool.
All right. Now, a couple of questions for that may help some players. For you when you were setter, what were some things that helped you better develop a better setter IQ?
Yeah, I mean, John Dunning was huge in this. Like he sat me down and basically gave me I came in Stanford, I had basically never set a 5-1 in my
Oh,
life.
wow.
Because I was always kind of this hybrid player and they almost always needed me to pass and hit. So I think I was probably the least experienced setter in the history of the Final Four. If you go back and look at it, I had been even the first half of the season at Stanford in my sophomore year, I was setting a 6-2. So he really sat me down between freshman and sophomore year and was like, we're going to talk about setting, which was so fun. But he really went through like, what are the things that you need to think about? What's your kind of checklist before, when you're receiving serve essentially. And so it was really, it went from like looking at what hitters do you have available? What are the blockers on the other side? What's the defense look like? Who would you want to set kind of given a good pass? How do you set up, the offense so that it gives that person, the best option to score? Then how do you make it look like you're not going to set them? So it was really a checklist and like how many items can you get through? So I think that was super helpful. So to me as a setter, it's like number one thing is you have to locate, uh, put the set in the right spot. Number two is, calling the right plays and understanding, what your hitters need and how to put them in the best situations.
All right. And then also, when you were playing, you had a couple of bad plays. What was your go-to reset and refocus?
Um, I think it's just like really positive self-talk. I mean, I think I was a fairly steady player because I had pretty decent self-talk. And so it was never like, wow, you're terrible. It was very much like, okay, what do I take from that error? What was the mistake I made? What do I take from it? What adjustments and how do I move on best to the next play? And so, one of the things that I talk about sometimes is like I was probably 15, just getting into high school when like blocking becomes more relevant.
Yeah.
I remember watching somebody just get housed, like she gets and she, head down, walks away, like, and I went, oh, like I don't want to be that. And so I really thought of it like, within any point, there's really 2 points available. I hit a ball, I get blocked, the other team gets a point. And then if I walk back and I'm like, head up, set me the next ball, um, still communicating with my teammates, then I win that point. So I think it's really about kind of competing in the space between the points,
Yeah.
as opposed to just when the whistle blows.
I like that, the two aspects. That's really good. And then, I had TJ Sanders on, and he actually made a good point. Is like, we were talking about setters, and he says, not every set needs to be corrected, or you will make mistakes. You touch the ball so many, that's life. You just got to roll with it. And I thought that was a very good perspective of it.
For sure, yeah. I mean, I think setters are probably kind of by definition perfectionists, and so it is, and it's also like it's okay to just acknowledge that it wasn't perfect. Like I think the hardest thing is in the sort of feedback loop is setters who set a ball and they know it's not right and they don't say anything. And so then the hitter every time has to be like correcting them. But as a setter, if I set a ball, I'm like, hey, I'm gonna get you a little bit higher. And it's not a big deal.
Right.
Like the hitters were like, cool, great.
Yep. Absolutely. And now for you, over your entire career of playing volleyball, who's been like a mentor for you that's really helped you get where you were with your volleyball?
Yeah. I mean, I think my club coach was probably the first one. Kara Haynes, she had played, maiden name's Milling. She had played at UCLA. And so I played for her my last 3 years in club. And she was the first, I think, to really kind of talk to me about the game at a different level. Uh, and also just having like somebody who had gone through it and at a really high level, had played for the national team for a bit, I think as a role model was really great. Then, John Dunning for sure at Stanford, he and I still talk. Jason Mansfield, also our assistant coach, who's at K-State now. He was really instrumental. And then, Karch obviously had a huge impact. And then a lot of people on the national team. I mean, even just friends like Tama Miyashiro is really good friends of mine. And so getting to go through the national team experience together um, was really, I think, a great kind of part of our lives. And probably Faluka also, who was just
Yeah.
a couple years at Stanford, and I got to play with her on the national team too.
All right. Very cool. And now, volleyball as a whole, the state of volleyball, I think volleyball is in a great space right now, especially with the women's game. Just look at that Nebraska football match. That was incredible. We're here now. In your view, what are the key factors driving the growth of women's volleyball for the next, decade?
Yeah, I mean, again, like the numbers are undeniable. I think uh, at the youth level, we're there and we continue to grow. It's one of the biggest sports, and also one of the ones that's growing fastest. At the college level, I think we're certainly on the way. I think we're probably I look at kind of softball and where it's at, where the women's side is really rivaling the men's college World Series. And that's because ESPN 10 plus years ago really invested in softball. And I think they're
Yeah.
at that place now in volleyball. So I think we're going to continue. I think also Big Ten Network has done an incredible job. So seeing, games get put on ABC and Fox and that kind of thing are huge. And so as long as we continue to see big numbers there, which we will, I think that's gonna keep growing and we'll get to where, women's basketball is, if not farther. And then the pro side is really the one that has the most kind of room to grow at this point. And we're still in that kind of early days. How exactly is this all going to work? And
Yeah.
are these what's going to happen with all of these different leagues and how are these lines going to cross in the future? Um, but it's really about growing that audience and getting the media to buy into it, because at the end of the day, it's all about how many eyes are on the product.
Yeah.
That's what's going to bring in sponsorship dollars, and that's what's going to bring in media rights money. Like I have no doubt that volleyball can be as big a sport as basketball
Mm-hmm.
is. It's just a different path that we have to take because the men's side is not, leading
Right.
the way in our sport, which is it's very like there's hasn't really been any sport that's done that. And
Yeah.
so it's I think it's a cool aspect of our sport. And hopefully the men's side continues to grow too, but it does present some challenges that other people haven't had to deal with. So, yeah, so I imagine, all of this pro side is gonna, you know, figure itself out in the next few years. And at this point, any kind of growth in the game is helping all of us.
Yeah, and I think women's volleyball is one of those sports where it's more exciting than the men's side. It's just a better packaged game, and is so many touches, so long rallies. But going back to the pro leagues, you guys are AU's in a great spot. Great, it's a sweet spot. PVF and Love, they're two different types of leagues. I'm just worried about a third league coming in now, and it's like just are people coming in just because it's the hot topic, and now we don't want to dilute these leagues because we want the women to be able to play here still.
Yeah, I mean, I think once people recognize that there is a real business opportunity, then more money comes in, and with that comes, more opinions on the best ways to go about it, the best approaches to take, and Love and PBF have very, very different business models, very different approaches
Yeah.
to how they're doing it. I think that the MLB idea has some slightly different approaches, and so it's really about whether or not those kind of disparate groups were able to come together and find enough common ground to consolidate in certain ways, or somebody just ends up a lot more successful than everyone
Yep.
else. So I think there's obviously the volleyball world is looking for less dilution and more consolidation and cooperation. Um, so yeah, like you said, I mean, I get to be in a really good spot because my players can go play anywhere else,
Right.
and I really think we're a great complement to the other leagues, and we work with them, all the time
Yeah.
and cooperate well. So that's been really nice. And then yeah, hopefully as we go, we get some clarity on kind of which approaches are working best, um, and which entities want to kind of work together in the future.
Yeah. And now one thing I've noticed since coming in, my daughter being part of club is, there's sort of I don't want to say neglect, but how can we make volleyball more accessible and inclusive, especially to those underserved communities? Is there anything
Yeah.
AU is doing, or is that something with, I think you talked about Path, is that something that Path has, or is it two different things?
Yeah, it's a big question. I would say AU does some. We work with Starlings mostly. And Starling is a great organization for people who don't know about it. It's a national network of clubs that serve underserved girls, and so they're one of the best programs out there doing it. USA Volleyball is also really focused, and the USA Volleyball Foundation is focused on kind of those efforts. It's a big question, across youth sports, the pay to play model, and how do you make sure that other kids are getting in? And then it's always more complicated than you want it to be. Like transportation is a huge issue. So like if
Yeah.
there's no, club in a certain area, like how do you get kids from one neighborhood to another? And um so yeah, I think it's a constant kind of thought amongst the organizations. And I know John Sparrow, the new CEO of USA Volleyball, is focused on, access for as many people as possible, and for younger ages. One of the
Yeah.
issues we have in volleyball is everybody can go play soccer at 5 years old, and
Mm-hmm.
it's real hard to keep a ball in the air when you're that age. So,
Yeah.
and then it's a big court, and so how do you maybe make some changes and figure out how to serve those little ones
Yeah.
too?
Absolutely. And then you talked a little bit about Path. What is Path?
Yeah, so we essentially create kind of short form content, featuring elite athletes and coaches. So that could, Steve Kerr or Kelsey Plum, or, from across sports, Paulo Ono, people who've been in the Olympians or the pros, really talking about kind of the lessons that they've learned. I think that we all say that sports teach life lessons, and yet there's often like very little intention around that. Um, So we've created kind of lessons to be a little bit more explicit. And then at the end, we give, here are some things to think about. Here are ways to actually practice these skills in the same way that you're practicing hitting a ball. So, coaches and teachers can use that kind of content, or parents, with their kids to just have a little bit more intentionality around those kind of skills.
All right, very cool. And now, what's your biggest hope for the next generation of girls coming into the sport?
Um, it's my hope. I hope that they get to experience and appreciate the sport, um, just kind of for what it is. Like there's so much around, you know, NIL and like the transfer portal and all of and social media and like all of the different things around it
Mm-hmm.
that, I hope they appreciate just going out on the court and playing the game.
Yeah.
So and getting better and kind of the process of that. And I hope they learn how to fail and their parents allow that
Mm-hmm. Yes.
that's like the biggest thing in sport is it is such a great teacher, but yeah, that like the process of learning how to learn is really important. Um, so I hope that they get those kind of pure aspects of the sport and fall in love with it and, play forever. And like, how great is it for them that they get to watch that now for, on TV when in college and the pros.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing since having my, one of my children into sports is this year round thing you see. I just wish there was a break for these kids. It's just, there's no windows really.
Yeah, I mean, I hope they play multiple sports as kids and don't specialize too early. Like it's a big challenge to figure out kind of, yeah, you want to be great or you love this thing. I mean, I played a lot, like I loved volleyball as a kid, but I never felt like I was burnt out or I didn't
Yeah.
want to do it. It was always kind of me wanting to be in the gym and but also play other sports growing up. And so that is definitely kind of in danger at this point.
Yeah. All right. Fun question. So, I had Eric Shoji on. Him and Taylor Averill have this thing, toughest position in volleyball. So, Cass, what
Yeah.
is the toughest position in volleyball?
Uh,
Or,
it's such a hard question because there's different types of tough, right? Like
mm-hmm.
mentally, the setter,
Yeah.
physically, middle, has to carry the biggest load, outside.
Yeah. All right. Just fine. Three are good. I had,
Yeah. In
and
different ways, in different
yeah,
ways.
absolutely. And even the libero, you have one thing to do. You can't afford not to be good at that
Yeah.
too.
If you ask me what's the hardest skill in volleyball to be good at, it's passing.
Yep.
There's so much bad passing.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, hey, and away from volleyball, what are some things you like to do?
Um, just the usual, like see friends and go to the beach, hang out. I'm actually in school right now. I'm getting an MBA, so I'm not saying I like to do it, but I do homework. Watch TV, read books, that kind of thing.
All right. Well, hey, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time. But before you go, like with past guests, I look for you to recommend somebody in your circle that would have a good story to come on and share.
Oh, good question. I know a lot of volleyball
I
people.
know you do.
I mean, Tama would be great. Tama Miyashiro would be great.
All right. We will get her on.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Well, hey,
Yeah.
thank you so much and good luck next season with AU.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.